Hey everyone, this is part 2 of my lightsaber tutorial video where I'm going to be talking about return events, hit events, and putting it all together. If you haven't seen the first video, then go back and check that out. Otherwise, let's get into it. Yay! You can continue to add stuff, it's really up to you. So there's a bunch of different effects that you can have, right? Returning the saber to your hand, returning it to its original spot. What I did here actually is made it so that if the blade is on, that is, if the scale is full, you're going to send it back to your hand, and then it'll float there for about 2 seconds. And if you don't grab it, then it'll go back to its original place. If the scale of the blade is at its smallest size, so if it's teeny tiny, well, then you just send it back to its home. I actually had it before so that if you threw it, it would kind of come back to you and then go back to its starting position, whether it was on or off. And that got kind of annoying because you just want to put it down and then it would come back and follow you like a lost puppy, and you'd say, okay, enough. So if the blade is on, we're going to send this return. We're going to send the return hand event. And if it's off, we're going to just send the regular return event. So because these are events, we're going to have to define them down here. Well, this is what the return hand event is. Pretty simple. Set the gravity of the object, being the saber, set it to false. That way it kind of will float in front of us. And you're going to move the saber to the position of the player. Now, there's no player variable up here, so that's why we had to define the player up here. We had to say, set our player ID to the player. So here is where this comes into play. And again, move to over time. So you would grab this. Where is that? Move to over time. You would grab this block. Oh, come on. Why isn't it coming? Why isn't it going over? Oh, that's strange. Okay, there it is. Move self to where? Well, then we would have to go to our operators tab, and we would say the position of the player. Where is it? Did I miss it? I think I missed it. No, I didn't. Where is it? I'm still getting used to navigating these things. There it is, the position of the player. So we would grab it. We would move. Instead of a vector, we would say to the position of the player. Which player? We would grab our player ID here. So there it is. And of course, it shouldn't move to your hand. It should move to your head. It should move to your hand. So that's that. Just delete that. Okay, now, what happens so that's when the return event, that's how I defined the return event, right? The return hand event. When the return event, so that's when it's going back to its starting spot, a few more things happen. First of all, you're going to set the trigger detection to off, okay? That way they're not running. You know, in theory, you could actually put it up here. And in fact, I did. So that's probably not necessary, actually, to put this with the to put it with the return script. But when you're dealing with lightsabers, it pays to be safe. So also, we're going to make sure that the blade is small. Again, probably not necessary since it should already be turned off at this point. But it's a little bit of overkill. You're also going to stop playing the sound. You're going to stop the physical motion so that it doesn't kind of bounce around. You're going to set the gravity back to true, in case it was kind of floating in front of you. And then finally, the key thing here is you're going to move the self to the starting position that we, as you recall, defined all the way up here. So you're going to move it back to that position and that rotation. So again, I mean, all of this stuff, I think I originally really just had these two operations, and then all of this stuff just got added later as I kind of built it out more and more and more. So a bunch of other stuff is going to happen because, again, this is what we've just talked about. That's enough to have the saber turn on. That's enough to have the saber turn off. And it's enough to have it either return to your hand when thrown or return back to its starting position. We also want the lightsaber to be able to detect hits, right? And so that's where our triggers come in that we created. So we have our when trigger is entered by player and when trigger is entered by object. And that's when different stuff is going to happen. So when the trigger is entered by the player, we're going to create kind of a spark as an effect. We're going to move that to the torso position of the player. Honestly, you could be a little bit more precise about it. I thought this was fine. You're also going to play a sound. You're going to play the visual effect. And this part's going to get kind of interesting. We're probably not going to get into it this time, but we're going to set a new player variable that, again, we created up here. Right? We use new variable, we name it, and we set player. So we're going to create a new player variable called player ID hit. What is the ID of the player that was hit? So when the trigger is entered by player, we're now defining player as someone different from holding it. Well, usually different from someone from holding it. It's going to be the player who got hit. So whatever player enters this trigger, we're going to set player ID hit to that player. And we are going to send player hit. This is a brand new event that we created. We're going to send the event to that player with the parameter player ID hit. That is going to help us gauge the damage, because what we have over here is actually a health management script. And that health management script, what is it doing? It's listening to events from, okay, I'm going to move this closer. It's listening to events from players. So when it receives that player hit, it knows to do all this stuff that's going to show that the health is going down. Again, I'm not going to get into it this time, but that's why we set that up here. And this is a really, really key thing that I'm going to come back to again and again. You can send events to other objects. So when I started, this was actually really, really hard for me. I was like, well, how can objects run multiple scripts? They can't. An object can only run one script. But if you send an event from one script to an object, if that object is running a script that knows how to detect that event, it can do a bunch of stuff. It's a super, super powerful thing, and I'm gonna bring it up again and again because that was a huge moment when I realized that. It really opened up the scripting. So anyway, so that's what happens when the trigger is entered by the player, and we're going to have to define what that trigger is later. When the trigger is entered by an object, that's different, right? That's not going to be a player. That's going to be a different trigger entered by an object, really any object, though it does have to be tagged because the trigger has to know what to detect. So that I'll show you that in a second. So when the trigger is entered by an object, we're going to move the hit effects to the position of the trigger that hit the object. Honestly, we could move it to the position of the object as well. That's fine. That's probably better. But the thing is, if we move it to the position of the object, actually, you know what, I take it back. It's not better. If we move it to the position of the object, it's just going to go in the middle of that object. So if the object's really big, it'll just go in the middle. It'll look off. That's why we actually want it on the trigger itself. It'll just look more accurate. We're going to play the visual effects on that object, so it's going to be like a spark, and we're going to play the sound on the hit sound that we created earlier. And I think that's it. That's the entire script. Again, there's a bunch here, but you can kind of walk through it and see the logic. If you have questions, please leave them in the comments. Feel free to screenshot, or again, if you want to be added as a collaborator, let me know. You can come check out this script yourself. Just don't make any changes until you import it into your own world. So, okay. So we have our script, and we have our lightsaber here. All we got to do, hilt, that's really not going to come into That's really not going to come into, wow, well, what is the word I'm looking for? It doesn't matter for our purposes here because nothing's running on the hilt. So this new saber, that's where, let's make this big. This is the whole thing, right? The new saber is the whole lightsaber. We're definitely going to want to run the script. Let's find it down here. Lightsaber script, version 2. It's actually more like version 3 or 4 at this point, but fine. So here we go. And we are going to want to find our blade. Where's our blade? I feel like I have it here. Here are our triggers. We're going to want to, oh, there's our blade. So now the blade doesn't actually have to run a script on it, but we do have to tell the saber, which is the object running the script, what the blade is. So it knows what to make small or big. So we're just going to, hold on a second, we're just going to take this pill, drag it down into blade, boom, there it is, it connected. And in fact, already you see the blade got small because what we said is when the world is started, make it small. It's small already. So there we can see it works. We also know that we have a bunch of sounds on here. We have our loop. Let's put that here. We have our start sound. Let's put that here. Let's start with those. Oh, and our hit. Our hit is actually going to attach to our triggers, not our, because that's what's, because our triggers are what the hit is reading. So we have our loop sound. Let's find that over here. Where is that? Sound loop. Take the pill, connect it. And our starting sound, I think I have that as on sound. On sound, there it is. Technically an on and an off sound, but all right, cool. So now we got to define our triggers. So there's a bunch of different parts here. I understand that, but again, it's a pretty methodical process, and so if you can walk through it, you can figure it out. I'll be honest with you, this stuff was really overwhelming at first, and it just took time. I've been doing this for about 2 months, and it felt, you know, there were definitely times when I was like, I'm not going to figure this out. This is too complicated. And then I would put it down for a day, think about it a little more, and the next day I would figure it out. So you'll get it too if you find this difficult and overwhelming. Again, our object hit trigger to our object hit trigger, variable. Same thing with our player trigger. Now, I did find it useful. When I first started out, I basically would define every object. I would run the script on every object involved and like cross-reference everything, and it just became madness. And I only recently realized that you don't have to do that. So you can be pretty strategic with what you run the script on. Now the trigger is going to have to run the script because there are a few events that are tied directly to entering the trigger. So let's do this. So let's find our script here. All right. And usually I wouldn't do this, but in this case, I just found it makes sense to just tell the thing what it is. Because in this case, you have 2 different triggers. And so I found that it doesn't really work great if they get confused between which one it is. There's probably a more elegant way to do it, or maybe it's a little bit of overkill, but I found that this works for me. Well, the only things we really need on the trigger, because the only things that's really triggered by the trigger are going to be our hit effects and our hit sound. So we're going to say hit sound, you go here, and hit sound, you go here. There it is. Now you'll notice I didn't actually create a hit effect because the hit effect is not going to be grouped into the saber. It's actually going to be its own thing. So I'm going to take this particle effects cube. I'm going to, well, not play on start. And we're going to make this the hit spark. That looks pretty good. Let's see, size-wise, that looks a little big. Yeah, I'll make it a little smaller. And honestly, this hit is going to just kind of sit in this area. It's not going to be grouped here. Why isn't it going to be grouped? Because this actually moves around. So if we go back to our script, you'll see here, when there is a hit event, we are actually just going to move that effects box to wherever the hit event happened. And only then are we going to play the visual on the hit effects. So in essence, this guy's going to be invisible and moving around to wherever we need it. So all we have to do here is define what that is. So it's on the player trigger. Let's grab the pill. Tell it what the hit effect is so that it knows what to do there. And where's our object hit trigger? Oh, this stuff closed out. Okay. Grab this pill and we're going to put it right there on hit effects. That way it knows what's what. And I think that should be it. Let's see if it works. So here we go. Yep. Again, we made this a little smaller than we wanted, but look at that. You can hear the sound. I probably turned the volume down a little bit. Yeah, that's working. Oh, and when it hit me, look at that. My health went down. You set that up. Oh, and there you see the hit effect going. Well, look at that. Let's now give it some gravity and see if the throw works. So let's, what are we going to do here? We're going to just make a little platform for it so it doesn't fall to the ground, because that would be disrespectful. So there you go. Let's make this all the way down. Let's see. Come on. Let me grab it. All right. Okay. So, oh, and of course, forgot to do the thing that I wanted to do, which was on our new saber, we're going to give it physics. So now it's not just grabbable, but it also has physics. There it is, both. So, grab it, turn it on, throw it. Does it come back? Yes. Yes, it does. Now we can turn it off. Throw it down. Does it go back to its home? There you go. That's a lightsaber, you guys. We did it. Look at that. Aw. You know what this is? This is like Ahsoka's like little smaller blade. We can make this bigger. In fact, why don't we just do that right now? This is the magic of Horizon Worlds, is that I can take this entire thing with all of these connections, all this madness. I can take this, thumb over to the right, and just pull that out, and then boom, you get another sword. And all of these connections should still work. And what are we gonna do? Let's just make this bigger. Oh my God, that's probably too big. But let's see what happens. Let's let that go. Let's see. Is that gonna work? Interesting. Oh boy. Oh my God. Well, we messed up there. Let's get it back. Okay, there it is. Let's grab it. No, I hear it, but it's not happening. Oh, okay. Well, let's figure out what's going on then. I bet all I have to do is, let's see, I bet all I have to do is go into this, come back out of it. All right, let's try that again. Let's grab it. Yes, look at that. So now we have, look at that. Fantastic. Hey everybody, that does it for our lightsaber tutorials. Please let me know in the comments what you think, or if you have any questions about anything. I'm not sure if that was a little too much or not enough, or some weird amalgamation of the two, but again, let me know. And stay tuned for our next videos. We'll talk about starships. All right, thanks so much. Bye-bye.